Hey everyone, my name's Alexandra and I am a watercolor artist. Today I'm going to be showing you guys a tutorial on how to paint a floral pattern. I absolutely love painting florals. As you guys may know, it's one of my favorite things to paint. Patterns are so fun because you can turn these into cards, prints, a whole bunch of different things. So let's get started. For today's supplies, you guys will need 2 cups of water. I have one for clean water, one for dirty. I'm using 3 different paintbrush sizes. I have Opus Allegros, number 8, 4, and 2. A napkin for drying my paintbrushes. For paints today, I'm using the Decadent Pies palette by Philisophy & Co. But because we are painting florals, you guys can use whatever colors you like. The main ones that I'll be using is green, some blue, yellow, and a bit of a red color. And lastly, for paper, I'm using 140-pound cold press watercolor paper. All right, so the first thing that we're going to be doing is painting our first layer on our paper. So the idea with this painting is that we're sort of just scattering floral elements around our page and we're gonna layer and build up. So with that, that means that the first layer we paint, I want it to be really, really light so that we can add and layer on top. So I'm going to start with a super watered down green colored paint, and we're just gonna start by painting leaves on our page. Okay, so I've watered it down to a color that I like. I'm testing it on my napkin just to make sure. And I'm just gonna start anywhere on my page by painting a leaf. So I'm gonna put the tip of my paintbrush down and I'm applying pressure as I pull back. I might get a little bit more paint on there. Applying pressure as I pull back in sort of a C curve to kind of get this raindrop shape. So now I'm gonna go in and I just wanna add the line for the stem of my leaf branch. And then we're gonna go and add leaves on either side of that stem. So tip of my paintbrush is down, adding pressure as I pull back. I'm just gonna get a little bit more water on there. Now for these leaves, I'm sort of staggering them on each side of the stem that I have. And I'm making sure that they're not all super stiff and facing the same directions. I kind of have them facing different directions from each other, staggered on either side of the stem. And it just gives it a more natural look. All right, and as you guys may have noticed, I forgot to mention before painting my first leaf, but I have taped off my paper. Reason for this is for this painting specifically, I kind of want to have that nice white border rather than painting all the way to the edge. Also, because I'm painting bigger things, this will help keep my paper from warping. So now we're just gonna go back into this leaf and I'm gonna add a few more leaves to it. And I can go right over that edge. And now I'm gonna paint really skinny little stems curving down to that center line. All right, and there is our first leaf. So now we're just gonna go in and paint some more of those. So for my next one, I'm gonna start with the stem so I know where to put it. I'm gonna do a nice big curved line coming to the edge of my paper, sort of around this first leaf branch that I painted. And we're gonna go in and paint our next set of leaves. So following that exact same concept, I'm putting the tip of my paintbrush down. I'm applying pressure as I pull back. Sort of that curved shape. And because I'm doing the leaves bigger for this one, I definitely could use a paintbrush that is a tiny bit bigger. Just because I'm not adding so much detail yet, but the number 8 also works fine because I can just fill in that center and this first layer is really nice and light. painting leaves and florals is honestly one of those things that I find so relaxing. I could just paint leaves all day. So this last leaf, I'm just cutting it off over top of where the tape is, and it'll go right to the edge of my paper. So now that I've painted those, I can go in and add my little stems to attach it to that center line. Now with this type of painting specifically, I'm just painting really loose florals, so nothing really has to be too particular, too perfect. Feel free to just have fun with it. And again, this first layer, we're just focusing on keeping it a really, really light color. So I'm gonna go in and add another branch into this top corner here. So I like to draw that guideline first, just to know where I'm gonna paint my branch and make sure that it's not running into any of the other leaves that I've painted already. And if you guys are having a hard time with trying to figure out how to paint these leaves, I do have a tutorial on how to paint watercolor leaves. This is one of the most basic ones that I use in almost all of my paintings with florals in them. So it's a really good one to practice and to learn. And then again, these leaves on the edge, I'm just sort of overlapping them with the edge of my tape there. All right, so we can fit a few more branches in here. So I'm gonna do a small one in this corner. Okay, and then we'll probably fit in one or two more branches. I might stick a longer one over here. Now, either before I started or at this point in my painting, it's a good time to start thinking about what colors you want to paint your flowers in. This is one of the designs that I've painted things before, and as I add layers, I've picked colors that maybe either are too similar together and muddy together, or that just don't look as good. So for something like this, I either like to make sure that I've kind of pre-planned already in my mind what colors I'm going to use, or it's even a good idea to paint little paint swatches and you can plan out your color palette. with florals, it's something that's really good and helpful to do, just to make sure that everything that you paint is gonna, first of all, match so good together, but also just set the mood of how you want it to be, whether it's more bright and fun and colorful or more soft and delicate. All right, so we're gonna add one final little branch over here. And again, for this part, you guys are welcome to put as many or as few leaf branches into your painting as you'd like. I've just decided to fill the entire thing, but sometimes I'll make them smaller and I'll spread them out more. All right, so now we're just gonna let the leaves dry on that first layer, and then we're gonna go in with our second layer, which will be some flowers. So now that our first layer of leaves are dry, we are moving on to the next step, which is adding some flowers in. I've decided to go with this sort of corally color for my flowers. So we're gonna paint some of those in, but I'm just gonna first go in and sort of mark where I want some of them to be. So with my small paintbrush, I'm using my number 2 brush. I'm just gonna go in. I have sort of a peachy brownish color, and I'm just gonna mark a few spots. I'm doing a small cluster of dots just to mark where the center of the flower is gonna be. So I'm only gonna start with a few of these, and then we'll add more as we go. But it's nice to just space out a few to start, and then you can kind of see where you wanna add in. So I've just put 3 spread out on my page for now. And then we're gonna go ahead and add in our colors. Okay, so I'm gonna continue using my number 8 brush. I'm just gonna mix up a color that I like. So I'll start with a more watered down version of it, and then I'll add more paint in to make it more pigmented. So we'll start with this one on the right here. That'll be the first one. So I'm actually gonna start from the outside and kind of following the same concept as the leaves a little bit, where I'm applying pressure with my brush to try to get that nice wide rounded shape. I'm pulling back towards the center. For these ones though, I'm not quite doing the pointed tips that we do on the leaves, so I'm doing it a little bit more rounded. And then while it's damp in each petal, I'm gonna add a more highly pigmented version of the color that I'm using just to the edges. So we're gonna do the same thing for the next one, for the next petal, starting sort of with a lighter, a little bit more watered down color. I'm gonna paint that petal shape. Again, keeping everything really nice and loose. And now I'm going in with that darker, more pigmented paint and just adding it to the tip. This one I had a little bit too much water, so I'm just gonna pick some of that up with my paintbrush. And then we're gonna do that and just keep working our way around. And I'm okay if I leave sort of some white spaces within my petal. It just gives it a lot more depth and a lot more dimension. So now we'll go right into the edge with that pigmented version of the same paint. So right away you'll notice the difference, that just by doing that, by starting light and adding in those deeper, darker colors, you get this really, really neat effect. So I might even go in and just paint 2 petals. And you'll also see that I am not trying to avoid the leaves that I've painted. I'm just painting directly over top of them. So that was my main reason for painting them as light as I did, was so that when I paint over top to get the flowers and all of those things painted, the leaves don't get in the way. They kind of just softly stay in behind. So I'm just gonna blend this one out a bit more. And then with this one here that is on top of the leaf, I'm just gonna add a little bit more color to the tip of it there. All right, and first flower is done, so we're gonna let that dry and we're gonna do the exact same things for the other two flowers that I've drawn out. Or I guess I haven't drawn them out, that I've painted the center for. We're gonna follow the exact same concept. So you'll notice that with these petals specifically, I am working pretty quickly just so that I can add in that darker paint while they're still damp. Okay, so next one is done. And again, we're painting really loose florals. We're gonna go in and we're gonna add some more details and definition once this, I guess this is our second layer of our painting, but once the second layer dries. So now, exact same thing, but we're going to the third flower center that we've painted. And you'll notice that some of my petals sort of run into the one next to them. For some, I'm trying a little bit more intentionally to leave the spaces in between, but either way, I am happy with how they turn out. And you can see, even looking back at this first flower that I've been painting, it's already drying really neat just by adding that deeper color to the end of my petals. Okay, so I've done 3 flowers. I feel like I could use another one in this painting, so we're gonna put one more in. I'm just gonna grab my small paintbrush to do the center of it. And I'm gonna put one flower here, sort of right by the edge. And as I'm looking at it, I feel like we could use another one. So we're gonna do one down here. So these centers of the flowers, I'm putting them really close to the edges, and we're gonna do what we did with the leaves and sort of have them overlap with the tape so that when we take the tape off, it'll look nice and have really clean lines around the edge there. So just continuing with the exact same concept. You guys will notice that I'm using my napkin quite a bit just to make sure that I don't have too much water on my paintbrush, which is sometimes easy to do, especially when you're using a really watered down version of a color. And now we're moving down to our last petal here. All right, and just to even it out a little bit more, what I do when I'm painting these kinds of designs is I want to look at my page and see that everything is sort of evenly spread out throughout the page, so it's nice and balanced. So I find that flowers are very heavy on this right side, need a little bit more on this side, so I'm actually just going to paint the edges of some of the petals to make it look like we have a flower right in behind here. All right, so now that that layer is done, we're going to work on the center of these flowers just to really make them stand out. So I'm gonna go in with a bit of a deeper color. I'm sort of mixing this beigey color with a little bit of a red. I'll add a tiny bit of blue just because I want it to go to almost a brown color. Okay, so now that I've mixed a color that I like, what I'm going to do is in the very center of these, I'm just going to dot in this color. So I'm essentially just doing a little cluster of dots and just trying to really make that stand out. So we're going to do the same thing for all of the flowers. So now that that's done, I want to make these flowers stand out more than they are now. So I'm gonna go in with this, the same color that I use for the petals, and we're just gonna go in and add some detail now. So I've been using my number 2 paintbrush. We're gonna use that for all of the detail that we're adding. And I'm getting a more pigmented version of this. And I'm just gonna start with this first one that I painted. I'm just gonna go around that top edge. And essentially what I'm trying to do is just clean up that line a little bit. Make it nice and smooth. And then I'm actually gonna take my paintbrush and just pull little strokes down to kind of have it look a little bit like shading. And now in the center, I'm gonna do the same thing. So I'm gonna make it a little less dark for this part. And I'm just gonna do tiny little wavy lines coming up towards that outside edge. So now this top one, we're just gonna blend that in to our petal. So just this essentially enhancing what we've already done. And we can kind of blend it towards where we drew those lines. So now I am gonna go around and do this to all of my petals. So I'll show you the next one in detail. So I'm just painting, extending that color down. And then I'm wetting my brush and I'm just blending that in. And now from the center, sort of a lighter version of the color, I'm just gonna do little lines coming up. So the main idea with doing this technique right now is just to really define the edges of the flowers. This first one that I have is already a little bit more defined, but a lot of these other ones are very loose right now, so we just want to add some more detail. Definitely not a necessary step. You can leave them loose like this and we'll add a bit more into our painting. But this is something that I like to do just to make sure that they're really standing out against those leaves that are in behind. So we're just going to continue with the same process with all of the flowers now. Alright, so now that we've finished adding details to our flowers, you guys can see that they stand out so much more against the leaves that are in behind. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna add some more flowers in. Super simple, we're just gonna do some little yellow flowers. I'm gonna grab my number 4 paintbrush and I dumped out my water because it was becoming very red from the color that I was using. So I replaced it with some new clean water and I'm gonna go in with my yellow paint. For these flowers, I'm gonna do them pretty pigmented for the first layer right off the bat. We're not gonna do a ton of detail to these. And I'm just making sure that I have a nice bright color. And now I'm gonna go into my painting and I am just painting tiny little flowers. So I'm painting just 5 little petals Now, if you guys want for these flowers, sometimes it is easier to paint in that center circle first. Otherwise, I'm painting them around sort of an imaginary center point. And we're just gonna spread them throughout the paper just to really balance out the yellow. I'm using my number 4 paintbrush for this. If you guys wanted, you can use a smaller paintbrush as well. So for these flowers, I'm just painting really small little oval shapes. And just like I did with all the other elements, I'm just spreading them throughout my page. So I'm sort of scattering them about so they're kind of equally spread around. If I look right now, it's pretty good, but we're gonna add another one over here. And again, the nice thing about painting your first layer of leaves really light is that even with this yellow paint, I can put it right on top of the green leaves and it looks fine. Okay, so I might just stick one more of those along the edge here. And then I'll do another one along the edge on the side over here. Okay, so now that I've done that, I can go in with my smaller brush and we'll add in the center of these. So for the center of these, you guys can feel free to use either a really dark brown paint. I'm using my navy, but I'm gonna take enough of it so that it is almost looking like black, but not quite. And exactly the same thing I did with my other flowers is I'm just gonna dot it in. So the reason I like to do this specifically after I've painted the petals is because with yellow paint specifically, if the blue is still wet, or even if it just overlaps a bit, it's gonna pull in that color and turn into a green, which is not what I wanted. I want it to just be almost so dark that you can't tell that it's blue, but it is. So that just adds that little bit of contrast, little pop of color. And it makes the yellow stand out more to have the center be something really dark. All right, so now that we've added in those last details with the yellow flowers, this is one of the points where I often will look at my painting and be thinking, okay, do I want to add more? Do I want to leave it as is? For this one specifically, I've decided that I'm going to leave it as it is just to make sure that it doesn't get too busy. But if I was to add more, one thing that I might do is add some big leaves on each of these pink flowers. So that is an option if you guys want to keep going. These designs are so fun. It's a great way to practice both different types of leaves, different types of flowers, and just it's a really fun way that you can do many little simple versions to practice color palettes, and then when you move to a bigger painting, you can see what you like together and what you don't. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. if you followed along, make sure to take a picture, tag me, or send it to me on Instagram at Alexandra Victoria Studio. I absolutely love to see what you guys are painting. If you want to see more different variations of these, let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, if you haven't already, make sure to like this video and subscribe to this channel. See you next time.